Welcome to the Seed Family Podcast,
where we explore natural, homeschooling, gentle parenting,
simple living, and family adventure.
I'm Rachel Rainbolt, the Sage Parenting Coach, coming to you from the Pacific Northwest, where I live wild and free in connection with my 3 wildlings and the Papa Bear in our fixer-upper on the beach. This is episode 60, and today I'm here with Sue Patterson for part 2 of the Unschooling Q+A. Sue, a homeschooling mom with over 20 years of experience, is also an author, unschooling coach, and podcaster. She helps families who aren't happy with their educational situations to know that they have options through her business, Unschooling Mom to Mom. So join us around the campfire and let's get living the family life of our dreams. Sue joined me in episode 58 for a special Unschooling Q&A episode, and we only got through 3 questions, but you all enjoyed hearing us veteran unschooling mamas and homeschool coaches talking these through so much that you reached out and enthusiastically requested more. So here we are. Welcome back to the show, Sue.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I could just keep talking with you and talking with you. It's fun.
Will you remind everyone briefly who you are and what you're passionate about?
Sure. I'm Sue Patterson, and you can find me all over the internet with Unschooling Mom to Mom on all the different social platforms. And so I was a perpetual volunteer for a long time. And then after my 3 kids were grown, they had grown up as unschoolers and they're now 32, 30, and 27. I had all this information and I thought, well, what am I going to do? I've got to find a way I can't just sit on it or leave and go get a career now. And so I turned it into a coaching business, and I help families who aren't happy with their educational approach see that they have options, because that's really what it's all about, that you can create whatever you want. And at first that might be scary and everybody's like, where's the formula? There's not really a formula. It is, it's just you and the kids figuring it out, making your way and listening to people who have done it before. And it's not that you're going to duplicate it, but you're going to, I like this part, not that part, this part, not that part. So that when you talk about individualizing a learning process or a learning situation in your home, this is like individualizing to the max. It's you and the kid, and you and each kid or one kid, however many you have, but it's all going to be different. And it's all and I just want to help people lean into that confidence that you can do this. This isn't rocket science. This is parenting from a position of wanting to connect with them and fuel them and help them grow and move in the direction that they're meant to be in the world. And so I just like to help people figure out how to do that. And so I have courses and guides and social media and a podcast and all kinds of things to do that.
Yes.
So that's probably enough, right?
That was perfect. And I love every word you said. I feel like there's part of why the last episode, I think, resonated so strongly with people is because there is so much like reassurance and confidence building, which allows us to like trust more and like relax more and have more peace more when we can see people who are ahead of us on the path having like walked that path and everyone's alive.
Everybody's okay. Nobody hates their childhood. Yes. Everybody still calls and checks in or comes over or says, will you do this for me? They still do that. And it's good. I think I was talking to somebody the other day and they were saying, yeah, it's really interesting to just hear the confidence in the voices of the moms who have grown kids. It's like no more of that, like, theoretically, this should work.
Right.
Or it worked for hers and mine is a little different, but I think it's going to work. There's just that kind of, that little bit of hesitation. I don't have it. I don't have a drop of it. I mean, it's not that I wouldn't change some things or do some things differently, but from a philosophical standpoint and from a, how does it work and will it work? Oh yeah, 100% it'll work. You know, it's about you unpacking your fears and doing a little bit of internal work to figure out how to do that, and then moving forward. So,
Well, I have to ask, what would you do differently?
oh, people always ask that. You know,
We
the
need to
other
put it
day
out
I
there.
said, well, I know I did. I always do too. Like I set myself up. I said to somebody, oh, we would have traveled more. We would have done more. And they're like, Sue, y'all were in the military. You moved all over the place. You took a month between every location to kind of explore the path on the way there, you know? And we moved from places like North Carolina to San Antonio to Alaska to California back to Texas. We had a lot of land to cover.
Yeah.
And it was great. And but I wish we could have done more. And I wish that I wish that I had worked on my mindset a little bit better. I wish that I had thought thought a little deeper about what am I afraid of? And then I could have conquered it quicker so that it wouldn't make me just have that kind of second guessy feeling all the time. I wish that I had kind of, you know, for me, I was always like, I got 3 kids. We got all these animals. I don't have time to do that. Let's just survive. Let's keep going. Let's have a happy time. And we did, but it was like I just compartmentalized and tossed it over to the side. And I wish I had kind of not been afraid to look at it. I think I was afraid it was bigger than it really was, you know, like that boogeyman in the closet. Just shine a little light on there. It's just something on a hanger.
Yes.
Yeah. And I just think I could have um not had so many little panic attacks. You know, realistically.
Yes. Well, hopefully these Q&A episodes are helping people to
Yeah, exactly. We didn't have these.
yeah.
We didn't have anything like this. And so we were all just kind of like, I I, I think so.
Well, with each one of these questions, we are shining a flashlight into somebody's dark closet.
We are. I love that.
Okay, Sarah wants to know how to respond when extended family, like grandparents, express concerns about their child's education. For example, when they will start reading.
Okay. Um, for the reading part, well, you know, there's just so many layers to this.
I know.
The question about reading is the question about how do you connect with the grandparent over to choosing something unconventional. So we'll do both of those.
Okay.
And so the grandparents, sometimes what we have to remember is you've done all the legwork. They haven't. You've been reading and listening to podcasts and doing these things. They just sent you to school and loved you and thought, that's good. They made it. They graduated. That was all they cared about.
Yeah.
And now you're saying you want more or you want different. And so sometimes that means, oh, you didn't like how it was for you. And then there starts to be a little defensiveness about it. And but sometimes it's simply fear. Like, what do you mean? Weren't those class parties with cupcakes fun? Like, they don't even let them bring them in now. What are you talking about? So they may not even have an accurate idea of what a school experience looks like. They're thinking about a school experience from 20 years ago. Oh, it's a lot different. So sometimes it has to do with talking to them about, you know, we are choosing a learning and educational path that works for our kids. right now. And see, sometimes you can give little words like that. Right now, this works for us. I'm not ruling it out that we won't someday send them to school, even though you're 99.9% sure you're not going to. You don't have to tell her that. You can say, I have coaches, I have all these things that I'm listening to, I'm reading research all the time. You'd be so surprised how many teachers are bringing their kids home to learn these days. That'll be reassuring. And and you can also remember that you as a parent, this is different because when you were a young parent, a new parent, and you were parenting a little one and you had no idea and you relied on your relatives to help you keep that baby alive because you didn't know what to do, and they kind of continued with that role of grand advisor and now you're like, no, I don't need an advisor anymore, and they're like, no, I like that role. And so some of that has to do with moving into these new roles of you as the parent in this family, as opposed to you as the daughter or the sister or the whoever needs help, whatever that scenario has been in the past. And so um, you might have to set some new ground rules. It might be, I get it, Mom. And one of the coolest things you did for me is you taught me to be an independent thinker. You taught me how, even if she didn't. I mean, it's all right. You're really just trying to get yourself out of a difficult situation. And or maybe, I mean, you might have to just kind of think about, what do I want as an end result from this? Do I want Mom to know of all the terrible things she did to me as a child? Well, let's not wrap that up in the kids now.
Yeah.
That's another issue that you can handle, that you can do or not, your choice. But if the issue really is she's worried about these grandkids, then let's just stay focused. How can we make her not worry about the grandkids? And so maybe what would happen is that she needs some, um, and I say she, but it could be he, could be anybody. Um, um, they need some tools for how to connect. It used to be, how are they doing in school? Oh gosh. And then they'd give their advice on that. Well, now you don't
Yes.
have that. And so you have to maybe say, how you can bake the best cinnamon rolls ever? I need you to come do that with the kids because we are missing your cinnamon rolls. Or I need you to give us a YouTube video. I need to do a FaceTime video on that. Just different ways that they have some strengths that they could share with the kids. Or, how can they connect with them? Maybe it is that you tell grandma, he's really into whatever he's into, so that she can talk about that topic. Now, I get it. Minecraft's going to be hard. But there could be other things. He's really noticing, we went fishing or we did something else um that they could talk about with them. And
Yeah.
sometimes the problem is that they don't have stuff to share with their peers, with their grandparent peers. Everybody else to say, well, mine's on the volleyball team and mine's the head of the student council and mine got on the National Honor Society. And she's like, well, I think mine plays Minecraft. Right. And so instead, why don't you make sure you have pictures that you send to them of they went to the nature center with all these kids and they got to hang out there and see bear tracks or watch the otters, or just to give her something to share in the conversation. Because sometimes they need that.
Yes.
I did have one time with my mom, because I was part of the beginning of the latchkey kids, where your mom worked and you
That
had to
was,
figure it out.
yep, that was me.
Yeah. And I learned how to make hamburger helper because I had to fix dinner. And it's really horrible meals. but I did them and I was super proud. And my mom wasn't picky. So and she was more concerned about, what about you? How are you? What about your life? When are you going to get to have a turn? So that was kind of an interesting little spin on it. And so, because that had been her perspective,
Right.
And so when we always remember everybody's got a perspective. So I'm like, no, mom, this is my choice. This is the way I want to. And, we think about in the first 20 years or so, it's about being a kid and getting raised by somebody else and figuring it out. The next 20 years, it's often about parenting. But there's still like a couple more 20 years is left. There's time. There's time. And she's like, yeah, but you could tell she had all these ideas in her head, and isn't that the basis of so much of our problems are these stories we get in our heads that we're just clinging to, whether the person we're thinking about even knows what their script is supposed to be, but we
When we say that we're going to do something different, our parents or extended family usually here, or even friends really, here there's a very real, like, in order for me to allow the space for that, I have to allow the space for the very real possibility that I could have done something differently.
right.
And that can be very uncomfortable for people to feel. So when you say this is what's best for our family, they have to then sort of retroactively consider, like, well, are you questioning if that was really what was best for you and for our family? Are you saying that I did it wrong? And a lot of that's not happening on a conscious level, which kind of makes it hard to,
Yeah.
to really like get
And that's why I think it's okay to go ahead and say, I think you did a great job for the information that was available at the time. People weren't doing this then. And even though they were, you don't need to emphasize, because they just want a little reassurance that you're happy with how it went, that they weren't like a total screw up. That's what everybody wants, right? And they just want to know that you are happy with how your life has gone on the stuff that they had to have a big say over.
And if you're not,
because that's the other issue, right?
Yeah. And if you're not, that's okay too. And that's totally, like, if you can give them that piece, wonderful.
Right.
And if not, just keep it focused on the present. Like
now.
yeah, like I have, you can say, like, gosh, I respect and appreciate you, your wisdom and experience and your presence in my life. And so on this issue, I've really heard everything that you've had to say about it. And so then I've gotten to know my individual kids' needs, and I've done a lot of research, and this is what we've decided to do for right now. So you don't have to agree with it, but we do ask that you respect it. And we would love for you to be a part of it if you choose. And here's how you could be a value add.
Right.
Like you said, like, this is where, like, my kids love to play with math through baking. And I did not inherit your baking skills.
Exactly. My mom wanted to pay for cleaning help. She's like, you're never getting around to this. I'm like, I know. She's like, no flat surfaces are safe here. I know. And so she's like, all right, I'm paying for someone. I'm like, yay.
Yeah. Yes, please. And thank you.
Right. Or she paid for, I'm like, at Christmas time or birthdays, she got season passes to things for the kids. And so that was so cool to have, like, season passes to the theater, season passes to the museum, season passes to the water park. And there were big chunks of money for a family of 5. And so she was able to help in that way and really feel good about her help,
Yes.
And we were, like, massively excited about it.
Yeah, that's like my favorite gift. And my mom and dad would, like, go in on that together, where, anytime, like, they would sort of, like, if I could feel the fears building in them around this whole unschooling thing, the very next, like, birthday or gift giving holiday, I'd have a whole list of, like, these museum passes and this, programming class that my kid wanted and whatever. Like, like, here's how you can help support their education.
Right. And even maybe help the kids. Like, now it's so easy with your phone to just record. So you could just say, tell me about what you remember when you were my age. And the kids could record grandma saying that, just for a little bit of a connection, and you'll be glad you have it later down the
Yeah.
road. So that's kind of interesting. One thing that happened for us early on, well, I guess it happened for quite a while actually. My mom would say things to my kids like, oh, I really wish you could have that opportunity to be, and then she'd think of some school thing. And you're like, are you kidding me?
Ugh.
Or she'd give them a grade 3 spelling book for a gift, like wrapped. And they were like, why can't we just go back to socks when you used to give us socks? That we would prefer it, where they used to always make fun of the socks,
Yeah.
And but they would, and so I had to have a conversation with her when they were probably, we were a couple of years into it. And I said, this is our choice. And if you have a problem with it, you have to come talk to me about it. You cannot talk to them about it. It's just not acceptable.
Yes.
And she's like, well, I can kind of talk to them about whatever I want. I'm like, and I can kind of not have that happen. Let's not go there.
Yes.
And so, because she was strong, she was a social worker. She was an adult protective services social worker. So like she had nerves of steel.
She was a force.
Yeah. And so, she just used to get in her way.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, no, it's not going to happen. It isn't. And so she pretty much toned it down at that point. And then I gave the kids a little secret script to say that really kind of stopped her. And it was, Mom said, if you start talking about this again, you're supposed to take it to her.
Perfect.
Not only did that give them an opportunity to skip out, because then you have freedom to leave the minute you say your lines. It kept it from, they're so disrespectful. No, they weren't.
Yeah.
And it reminds grandma that you've been talking about her, and she's probably not going to like that. And it reminds her what she's supposed to be doing. And because you've already had that conversation with her about, you've got to talk to me. You cannot talk to the children about it. That's undermining everything. And, we don't do that.
Yeah.
And
Boundaries are
right.
the best.
They are, and they kind of change, right? When you're a
Yes.
younger parent, they're in some places, and then you have to kind of like, this isn't quite where I want them.
Yeah, absolutely. They evolve over time. I think a lot of people get stuck on boundaries in that they think that the work of boundaries is when you state the boundary. And I just want to um, invite everyone to kind of shift their relationship with boundaries in that it's really not the work of the person receiving the boundary to hold it. Like that's
No,
your work to
that's
hold
your
it.
job. Yeah.
Yeah, that's your work. So you can state a boundary, like telling your mom not to ask your kid about reading, and they will come back and state it repeatedly. So they will push up again because it's not their boundary to hold,
Right.
it's yours.
Right.
So you have to be crystal clear with yourself, with your kids, and with your mother or whoever it may be, exactly what holding that boundary is going to look like. So maybe it's, grandma lives far away and she FaceTime calls, and you say, if you quiz my child on reading, I will end the call.
Right.
Like simple, clear. And if your kid is old enough, like loop them into that, into collaborating around what they want that boundary to be, because each kid might feel differently about it. They might have a different like preference level. One kid, it might not bother at all. Like
and maybe it helps to give them both, grandma and the kid, here are some cool things to talk about for you guys.
Yes.
Like even
absolutely.
and this doesn't have to do with that. It just has to do with, sometimes people don't know. Like for instance, Jackson, my grandson, is 6, and he was on the phone with my husband, who is older than 6. Well, and so he he's not a phone person, and so he's
Mhm.
like always trying to get off the phone. But
Mhm.
Jackson really wanted to talk to him, and he just couldn't. I could hear it in his voice. All right, well, we'll see you in a day, or all right, well, and I'm like, okay. So I'm like, okay, here's a website with knock knock jokes. The next
Perfect.
time Jackson's trying to get off, or you're trying to get off the phone because you can't figure out what to talk about,
Yeah.
start in on the knock knock jokes. And he's like, yes. So sometimes they just need a little help at finding ways to connect, or ways to just have some common ground.
Oh, I completely agree. Like at one point, our whole family really got into Doctor Who. Like we went on this
Uh-huh.
Doctor Who
Uh-huh.
binge. And so like we gifted my mom like the DVDs, and
Oh, okay.
she like watched all of the Doctor Who and was like totally into it with us and
Oh.
was, they would talk about it and play it out, and little guys when we're waiting for our food at restaurants would be Doctor Who characters and whatnot. It's like sometimes, like you said, you just need that like little invitation, like that little bit of like creativity to kind of
Right.
bridge the gap and give them a yes
Because
as
that's the
opposed
thing they don't have with, I mean, some grandparents are creative, but most of the time when they're talking about schoolish stuff, they're just going by old familiar things. They're not looking at it from a creative standpoint. And, um, you know, I think that they just need help,
yeah.
because they're just thinking it's like, how's the weather? How about those Rangers? I mean, it's just, okay, I've done my repertoire. Now what?
Yeah. What's your favorite subject? My kids joke that that's like the only question that adults know to ask kids. What's your favorite subject in school? They like
And the
place
other
bets.
answer is to tell your kids pick one.
Yes,
Just say history.
totally.
Science. I think this month is science for me, man. Yeah.
Yeah, my kids, it depends on which kid and what kind of mood you catch them in. So
Right.
I have one kid that loves a good debate, and we'll
Oh.
we'll
Oh.
we'll go all in,
Well,
with
that one
someone.
could say, well, it's hard to differentiate between the subjects, when I
Yeah.
have this activity and I see the history and I see the science and I see the reading and I see the art, and I wonder which subject I like best out of this. And
Totally. Like we don't conceptualize learning into subject silos. So,
right,
like
right,
she'll like get all it. Whereas like the other kids, they'd be like, they'll just pick one.
right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And giving
Turtles.
everyone.
What subject does turtles fall into, Grandma? That's the one I'm into.
Yes. Sailing. That's what my youngest says
Oh,
right
there
now.
you
If someone
go.
asks, he says sailing. And then, and then they look at me and I'm just very clearly communicating like, yep,
Yes, that's true. We're
yep,
very
that's
into sailing these days.
that's accurate.
That's
Well,
funny.
I'm going to link to episode 18 on judgment that I have where I talk a lot about this. And then I'll also
Okay.
link to the reading episode too, since you
Okay.
did bring up reading. But do you have anything to add on that?
I do have an unschooling guide that's about critics and naysayers.
Ooh,
And
that's a
so,
good one. We'll link to
yeah,
that for
and so it's
sure.
about 20 or 30 pages of things to read, a little bit of journaling, a couple things to think about, things to maybe do, whether it's different if it's family or if it's friends or if it's spouse. You can have criticism from all different directions, and
Yeah.
how you handle it's going to be different. So yeah, it's a great guide to help people
Awesome.
walk
We will
their way through it.
definitely link to that. And
Awesome.
anything to add on the reading front that you want to say?
Oh, the reading. Well, reading, I always want to just say reading is not the holy grail.
Yeah.
And, in school, it kind of is, because as kids move from primary grades, first, second, third, and they're moving into fourth or fifth, the teaching methods shift, and they go from the teacher reads it all to you have to read it for yourself. So it is
Mhm.
really important for school kids to learn to read by that age. There's a lot of pressure for that. And because the methodology is going to change. And so that's one of the reasons that exists. It does not exist in your home like that. And
Yeah.
so you don't have to take that on. And so I think remembering that, and knowing that reading in and of itself isn't the goal. even though they had reading class, reading is just a tool to bring more information into your world. And so if you can get information into your world by videos or audios or conversations or experiences, reading is just another mode of entry. And that's not the be all and the end all anymore. So that allows you to be able to do whatever that learning style of the child. You can move in the direction that's their strength, because then they can continue to gain more information, get more confident, and then it buys a little time for the brain to get ready to read. Because we don't all, just like we don't all potty train at the same time, we don't all walk at the same time, and we don't all learn to read at the same time. And there doesn't need to be any pressure about that, because that's going to cause more problems down the line. If all of a sudden, oh, not reading yet,
Yeah.
that's difficult. And then it starts to affect how they feel about themselves. And our goals for my family and for a lot of unschooling families are to keep this environment in such a way that learning can happen without a lot of speed bumps in the road. And so that means that we maybe do like pre-literacy type things. We make sure there's words in their lives. We make sure we point out the words they do know. We notice that, I've had a lot of families say, well, he's not reading, but, and then they describe these things they're doing where they're chatting with friends on Minecraft. Like, he has to be reading something, to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And so sometimes they are reading, they're just not reading, I don't know, Redwall or something.
Yeah.
They're reading, just for what they need. And that's okay, because that's how real learning happens. When you need it, that becomes the catalyst to learn it. And if you just say all people that are your age need this, then they're like, no, I am a person of that age and I don't need it. So I have already found a problem in your theory.
Yes.
So if you just rely on, if you do the unschooly legwork about learning and children and all of that, then you can rest assured that we're hardwired to learn, and that when they need something, you're going to be there because you've been working on this trusting relationship with them. And they're going to say, I don't know how. And you're going to say, how about a couple of these? This might help, or I'll spell this for you, or, whatever we need to do. So that becomes the reason, as opposed to you saying, you need this. And they're like, no, I don't.
Yeah. And if you feel like you need to do something, like sometimes we just feel so profoundly compelled into action,
Mhm.
then exert that effort on like yourself and your home environment. So like if you want more reading to be happening in your home, then read more books.
Right.
Bring
And
more.
maybe do family reading. Find some
Mhm.
books that people want to hear.
Yes, we
And
read aloud every night. It's my absolute favorite part of the day. Even my
yeah.
bigger kids all look forward to it and we love it. And it's like a huge point of connection for us. But it's also always been something positive. Like there's
Right.
never been any
It's like, we're
pressure.
getting in there and we're reading
Yeah,
this.
yeah,
You're like,
yeah,
oh.
yeah. It's like mommy is available for like all the cuddles and
Right.
conversation
Right.
and like adventures through these and like I'm clearly excited about it and I love
Yeah.
it and like I'm doing voices and I can't wait to
Yeah.
start the next
Oh,
chapter.
that's so fun.
That's
I
just
can remember being
contagious.
exhausted, though, a couple of phases. And I remember doing the same thing with Audible books too, that we could all just lay there and listen to them read to us. That's kind of nice too. If you're having one of those times in your life that you're like, no, the minute I stop, my eyelids close.
Well, I have to share like personally too. I think because of school, I never read for pleasure. Like
Oh, me neither.
I
Yeah.
was always reading, but it was always for school. And it wasn't until I had my own kids
Right.
that I then got the experience of reading for pleasure. And it's been so thoroughly enjoyable,
Right.
especially now that they're a little bit older and we read books that like are really engaging and interesting.
Uh-huh. That's interesting. I think that lots of us have that experience, right? We've just
Yep.
had it kind of drummed out of us.
Yep,
And
absolutely.
yeah, and I'm 60 this year. And I joined my friend who I've known since I was 10. She lives in Mexico. Now she lives in Colombia. And she started an international fiction book club for women, just her friends. I'm like, no, can we read some nonfiction too? Because, there's a couple I want to read. And she's like, fiction only. I'm like, fiction only? In my mind, I'm thinking, what a waste of time. Even though I had read fiction with the kids and we loved it, I
Mhm.
had not, it just didn't move in my direction. And I think a lot of it had to do with my school experience. I was always just
Yep.
reading Cliff Notes and trying to make it, do the test in the shortest possible way to get there. And I am having the best time with these
Oh,
fiction books. It's been wonderful.
I
So
love that. I love that.
yeah.
And hopefully it just really emphasizes for people out there that force that like if you feel compelled into action, like that is a signal to you that you are longing to have more of something in your life. Like put
Yeah.
it back on you and then do that work there. Like if you want more love of reading in your family culture, then just fall more in love with books, try new books, read new
Right.
books, that make it your work. If you feel like there's some work to be done, just don't put it on the kids.
Yeah. I think that that's a really common thing that people think, no, they need to because we got to check that box.
Yeah. Or like music lessons. Like I see that so often with music lessons where it's like, no, my kid needs to play piano. I want them to play piano. Like, well, that's your thing. Like you want to play piano, then play piano.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That opens up all kinds of things, right?
I know. Okay, let's see if we can get to two questions.
Get back.
I mean,
Get back to unschooling. All right. All right. Where
let's
are we?
try. Okay, how to unschool with multiple kids of different ages and temperaments. What insight do you have to share for those parents struggling with kids, sort of across the spectrum?
Well, I had that. I had 3 kids that were completely different personalities.
What were the age differences with your
Um,
kids?
Michael, let's see. Michael and Katie had 22 months apart and then 3 years until the third.
Okay.
Katie, I needed a little more time with. And yeah. And so they were, 3 under 5. And and it the best thing I can tell you is that if you're going through a difficult phase, take some stuff off your plate.
Mm.
Stop telling yourself we have to do this because they have to have this experience. They maybe don't.
Yeah,
They,
yes.
they may be that experience with a mom that's frantic and screaming.
Yeah.
Suddenly isn't that great of an experience.
Yeah. How to do it all is really a question of what to not do. Like,
Right,
what to cross off the
exactly.
list.
What can I cross off the list? Who could just take, because sometimes it's back to that story in our head, right?
Yeah.
I've got this story of this harmonious family going together to this event and everybody's dressed perfectly. And no, know that that's usually, I mean, it can happen. Occasionally it happens. And sometimes more often than not, it doesn't. And so sometimes what can happen is you can get somebody else to take one of the kids, or the
Mhm.
kid that needs to stay home more can stay home with someone else, or the kid that needs to go a lot, look around and see how can we help them get what they need. It doesn't mean all 5 of us have to go. And sometimes it means, all right, like Katie was in the theater. And so, you would have some nights that were really long or some weeks that were a lot of rehearsals. And so we'd pack backpacks full of stuff. And, there's all this My Little Pony stuff happening up in the balcony because that's where Alyssa is. And sometimes you and sometimes it's a matter of helping them understand that there's a level of cooperation that needs to happen. And they went to your soccer game, so you go to her theater thing. And this is part of learning to live with multiple people. And I think that that's a good practice ground for being able to live with more people in a world,
Yeah.
learning just how do we cooperate? How do I make sure, you know, she gets what she needs because we make sure you get what you need. And if they feel like, well, I don't get what I need, well, then there's the conversation that needs to happen. What do
Yeah.
you need?
I
What do
think
you
the
need?
heart of this, like how to unschool with multiple kids that are different ages and temperaments, is that it's not really a homeschool question. It's a question of human relationship, how to
Right,
live in respectful connection with another human being where
right,
you're honoring each other's different needs, and you
right.
honor those different needs in education the same way you do in parenting and in
Mhm,
partnership. There's
mhm.
really no distinction for us as unschoolers.
Right. And so, like, for instance, I'm thinking of reading aloud. We did a lot of times that we read aloud, and Alyssa really wasn't into it. So she colored while we read aloud,
Yes.
and she wasn't even listening. Okay. But she got the kind of warm, fuzzy feeling. She got to have the popcorn. She got to
Yeah.
do all the stuff that came with having that happen. And that was all right. And so I think that sometimes people have that question because they're thinking, how do I do grade 2, grade 3, and grade 5, and we didn't do that.
Yes,
So,
same.
I mean, maybe that's the problem. And that's set up for a system, and you're not a system, you're a family. And I think when you remember that, then you're in a much better place to be able to meet the needs of the individuals in the family.
Yeah.
And that's what this is all about. It's not about finding a kinder, gentler way to force grade level material on them. That's not what
Yeah.
this is. This is about saying grade level material, it'll show up when it's needed or it won't. And there's no finish line. And they can decide at 60 to join a ladies fiction book club if they want.
Yes.
you know?
Yes. I like your backpack example. I think a lot of times the creative solution is really just like about practical accommodation. Like if you
Right.
have one kid who's an introvert and one kid who is an extrovert, like and wants to go to the unschooler park days, like maybe bring a hammock and a stack of books for
Exactly.
the introvert, and you're going to hang the hammock between some trees at the edge of the park, and he
Right.
doesn't have to talk to anybody if he doesn't want to. He can just have like relaxing book time.
And we
And
had times that at the park day that somebody that just couldn't get enough, they could go home with someone else, or they could get dropped off at home and stay later at the park because this one's having a meltdown and we got to go.
yes, yes, exactly. It's just not. I love like the emphasis from us that like this is really just about like being in relationship with other
Right.
humans.
Well, and we're doing it, and that's really different too, right? Because from a
Hmm.
parenting standpoint, most of the time, learning how to parent children only happens in a very small window
Yes.
where it includes dinner, baths, and bed.
Yeah.
And you're trying to get them to bed by about 8 o'clock because the school bus leaves about 6:15, and you've got a problem. And so you taking into consideration the individual needs isn't really going to happen
Yeah.
because there's just so many. I mean, it'll happen some,
But you're
but
stuck within the confines of their system.
exactly. And so with this unschooling way, and even that applies to when you're trying to do school with structure, that you're doing a
Hmm.
lot of subjects and you're trying to get it done, you're still then limiting the hours of getting to practice being with other human beings that have needs and wants. And so
Yeah.
with an unschooling approach, you've got all day of that. And so sometimes that's great and it gives you a lot of room to practice and to have trial and error, but sometimes it's a lot of error. and I think that that's not the end of the world. School kind of convinced us that You got to get it right. And if you get it wrong, be embarrassed.
Mm.
And that's not healthy, because healthy is, it's all just data. It's all just, this worked, this didn't work. What can we modify for the next time this rolls around? As
Yes.
opposed to this is good and this is bad. No, it's just data.
Yes, yes. And if your kids, like if you have that relationship with them where it is more like a human relationship and not like a having a really skewed power structure,
Right.
where like collaboration is how you learn through those experiences, then your kids are kind of primed for that. So when something doesn't feel good for them and it doesn't work for them, like they can come to you with sort of that mindset of like, hey, this is how it felt for me. And I'm wondering if we could try it this way next time.
Right. Right.
And we come to them in the same way. That's another huge piece, is that it's not just like parenting where we're imposing this on kids. This is about human relationships. And that means there's space for us too, like our
Right.
different age and temperaments. Like
Exactly.
what things do we want to do? What settings do we enjoy being in? Like my kids know that I get, there's like room for all of my needs as well. Like we're all working together to find what works for everyone, parents included.
Right. Right. And I think that sometimes, when you think about kids that are, I think of parents' arguments to that are sometimes, yeah, well, my kid is really frustrated and screaming. And, usually those responses come because they don't feel heard. They're not getting listened to. So they got to amp it up a little to
Yeah.
see, will you hear me? Because here's what's happening. And we are often on a completely different wavelength. And so we've got to get on their wavelength. What's the problem here? How can we solve this? And do you need a little time and space? Or do I need to know that next time I need to not rush you? Because that
Mhm.
may be the big thing, is that lots of times for me personally, I was always trying to squeeze one more thing in. And then I'm like, okay, now we got to go. And they're like, what? I'm in the middle of this. Or what? I can't find my shoes. Or what? And then you're like,
Yeah.
I'm so tired of looking for shoes. You're like, okay, we're keeping shoes in the Rubbermaid in the back of the van. You're going to have backup shoes. You may not like them, but we will always have shoes.
Yes.
You just have to figure out, maybe you need more time. Maybe you need to not
Mhm.
squeeze one more thing in. And so then that's about what I was thinking while you were just saying that. That's about me recognizing I may not get all the things done that I want to get done, because I have to also listen to the things that they want to get done.
Mhm.
And when I and so a lot of the times the chaos moments came because I was making sure I got my stuff done, and then they got to do theirs fast.
Yeah.
And that's not fair.
Rushing
And
is experienced as a threat to the nervous system.
yes. And you can imagine, if you put the shoes on the other foot and somebody comes in and you're in the middle of, I don't know, having a conversation with somebody on
Let's
Facebook.
go, let's go, let's go, let's go.
Yeah, you're like, whoa, 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 whoa. Yeah. And especially somebody that really could make you
Yeah.
and pays for food and houses you and could decide, I'm turning that Wi-Fi off, or all the things that people use sometimes as tools to make sure that
That they have
I'm
the
the
power.
boss,
Yeah.
and so I think, again, it all goes back to how do we deal with other human beings that we get to live with, and we get to help them experience a really joyful, enriched life. And that means we all have to cooperate. We all have to make concessions. And, you know, I don't know. I share some of those negative things because I think sometimes people think, oh, she sounds so relaxed. Oh, she sounds like, oh, I wish she was my mom.
People always
Well,
tell me that won't work for me because my kids aren't easygoing like hers. Like she just must have really easy kids. Of course, this is people who do not know my children.
exactly. And yeah, I think that No, we all have kids that are a handful.
Yes.
I mean, sure, we can probably all name somebody that we think, oh, well, their kid was super easy. Well, super easy at the moment you're noticing. That doesn't mean
Yeah.
they'll be easy later. That doesn't mean they were an easy baby. It doesn't mean, it's just, all right, maybe they've got some other mountain to climb.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. Okay, I am going to ask you one more question.
Okay.
How can I support my child in learning through their interests if it's something I don't know much about? And I'm going to add, like, this is kind of a spin on the question I hear all the time of how are you qualified to homeschool if you're not a teacher? Like, I feel like a strand of that in this question, which really comes from that like school baggage where you were taught that the teacher is the gatekeeper of all of the knowledge. And
Right.
that is just not true. Like, I don't play the role of the teacher, and me and my children don't pretend that I know all the things.
Right. And
My
also,
intention is just to support them in learning
yeah.
how to learn whatever they want or need to understand whenever they want or need to learn it. So I can be just one of the resources they tap into. I might know the answer to their question, but
Mhm.
that's alongside like the internet and connecting with mentors in a particular subject
Right.
area, spending
Right.
time in a place where the topic's explored. I mean, books, classes, all the ways that humans learn things, right?
Right. 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 Yeah. And I think that I agree that that idea that we have to be all knowing is insane. And it's not even true because I'll tell you, I taught in college, I taught in a nursing school. And I, at some point, had to teach the nutrition class. And I didn't know a thing about nutrition other than like basic stuff. And there I was, the expert teaching it. And it was super hard. And I didn't do that great of a job. But if you go with that idea of all teachers are all knowing, I'm living proof that that's not true.
Yeah.
That there are a lot of teachers that get stuck in a class because that's what they got,
Hmm.
and they don't necessarily, they're not necessarily, that's not their expertise, but they had to pick up that class because somebody was pregnant and they weren't coming that semester or whatever was the scenario. So
Yeah.
that's one scenario. The other thing to remember is part of the school system and the way it works is that you are confident that this expert is going to deliver the information to you. So all of their setup is about that.
Yeah.
And so after we leave it, we still are kind of buying into that idea of gotta have an expert, gotta have an expert.
Hmm.
And no, we especially know now that there's YouTube, there's so
Yeah.
many ways to learn something. And I think that we have to kind of dismantle that idea of got to have an expert. I don't need an expert for kids that are 6 or 7 years old. I need a mom that's engaged.
Yeah.
I need a mom that's curious. I need a mom that is willing to help you find resources. That's your role. You're kind of like the tour guide or the resource finder or, things along that line. And those ideas of people that are, I've got to teach every subject to the children. Um, they're just coming from an um, misinformation because schools, number one, their teachers don't necessarily know all information,
Nope.
and number two, we don't have to have that teacher learner. When we really
Hmm.
remember that learning belongs to the learner as opposed to setting it all up about the teacher and what the teacher wants to deliver and the lessons that are going to happen. And that's not necessary because that's like a lot of extra work for you to do in your
Yeah.
head and in your life. And and there's a variety of reasons that we do that, and one of them has to do with we're trying to be an expert. And you just need to be curious. I don't know, let's find out. I don't know,
Yeah.
what does that mean? I don't know, let's go see. Your uncle knows a lot about that. Or we can find it on YouTube, or um, I do know that there are a lot of people that are going to say you're not qualified. And you have to just remind yourself they're not well informed.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, the school system stands, in order for it to maintain its structure, it needs to convince you that is the only way that learning happens, with an expert pouring into an empty vessel, and you are that empty vessel. But like,
Right.
to learn is a verb, and we can really just kind of lean back and get out of some of our own like defensiveness and reactivity even, and think about like, what were some of the last things that you learned, and
Mhm.
how did you learn them? Like, what was something that you learned outside of a classroom? How did that learning happen? Because that how to learn piece is really what I think it boils down to. And we can be allies to our kids, and guides in a practical sense, like connect them to a mentor, drive them to a place or whatever.
Right.
Like, we can do all of that without knowing all the things. And wait, and what a relief to be able to put down that mask that so many mainstream parents and educators wear, like to have to pretend that you know all the things. I mean, you get to be human here. Like, your kids get to know that you don't know all the things, and that helps you to connect. Like, they are so much more willing to learn things when they don't feel like they have to pretend like they have all the answers, because that's the ultimate goal, right? Because that's
Right.
not the goal for us. I don't pretend I have all the answers, so they can come to me and be like, I don't understand this thing at all, like, do you know how this works? Like, whereas most kids that I've interacted with, including the younger version of myself,
Right.
would not have been able to do that.
Right. And I think the other thing, that not only does it allow us to put that mask down, which is wonderful, it allows our kids to go to a depth that fits them,
Oh,
as
yes.
opposed to, no, we're not going to learn about the moons around Jupiter until fourth grade. And you're
Right.
like, but there's a lunar eclipse and there's some things happening and we'd like to, no, sorry, fourth grade. And I remember that was with my son when we first took him out of school. What the teacher was like, I'm so happy, because he was so disappointed when I told him that he would get more of it in fourth grade. And I could see his little mind thinking how far it was away to
Oh,
fourth grade. And she's like, now you can do his whole room and solar system.
oh.
And and so all three of my kids had very different interests, none of which were mine.
Mm-hmm.
And so I helped them find people and places that they could explore it. Michael had decided at some point he wanted to do camera work at a TV station, and we had this connection with somebody at a PBS station, and we lived an hour and a half from Dallas, but we drove to Dallas to their PBS station because they had a program that they would help kids, and it was a homeschooling mom that was, it was just like one thing led to
Awesome.
another. And
Yes.
so he got to see, no, I don't really like this. And but I thought I did, and I got to learn some stuff. And then Katie was really into acting and theater and dance and all of that. And so I learned how to run a spotlight and how to help change the set and how to sew costumes. I can really only,
Yeah.
I always call it stage sewing because it looks good at 20 feet.
Hold up.
Don't
Close.
look closely. It's just held together with a little tape. And and then Alyssa was really into hair and makeup. And now she's 27 and she's about to buy her own salon and have 10 people work for her.
Oh.
And so she had learned business skills. She ended up at about 14. She worked at an organic makeup store as an intern.
Mhm.
And she got to learn how to do all kinds of things there, where she learned the business side of it. I didn't know anything about how to run a little shop. And but she did. And so that was cool to be able to just find the resources where they could go to the depth that they need to go. And it's, never in my wildest dreams did I think I'm going to clone myself or
Right.
they're only going to have my interests, or that's just not how that path really works.
Yeah. And it's really affirming for me. I think like these little like wins where I'm like, yes, I'm like totally parenting and unschooling in alignment with my values when my kids like reflect some of these things back to me. So like I'll be working on a project, and my kid will be like, "Ooh, what are you working on? Tell me all about it."
I
Or like
love
they're
that.
going into the library and they're like, "Hey, you were asking about that one thing. Do you want me to grab a book for you on that?" Like just when they, kind of like reflect back to me, just somebody being like interested and curious in the things that you're learning
Oh, I
about
love that.
and playing with and working on and like trying to be
Even helping you
supportive.
problem solve it a little bit.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
they're capable. They don't feel like mom doesn't need me to problems. I had that happen the other day. I couldn't find a file that people were looking for. And I was on a coaching call, a group coaching call. And
Mhm.
they're like, you did this file once. And I'm like, I have no recollection of what that was. And I'm like, can't find it, can't find it. You should see my Google Drive. It's a disaster. And turns out I had made this 5-page document in 2018 and I had forgotten about it. And so I mentioned that this had happened to one of my daughters, and she's like, all right, so here's what we're going to do. You're going to get this Google Drive and you're going to get these folders, and I'm going to come over and I'm going to help you get this lined up so that you don't have to have this. It's going to be super easy, Mom. It's not even going to be hard. And I'm the one in the family that knows a lot about computer stuff, but I had a problem and she immediately just kind of swooped in and wanted to help. Because she had some ideas about this is how we set it up when we worked at this salon, and they had all these files, and then you could find everything from 2018, everything from 2019, all your 2.0s, all your so she had like in her mind, it was just a system that she was all ready to share with me because she knew about it.
Uh-huh.
And nobody, I think that where that kind of fits in here is that there's not an idea that mom knows all. I just wait to be told.
Yeah.
It's a collaborative effort, all of it. We're all just partnering our way through the world. And that means that they have value. And they could feel their value. How empowering is that to be able to say, come show me, or play Minecraft and like, I can't get out of this thing. I can't stop banging my head on this thing. They're like, oh, here, do this, Mom. And, it's just part of that empowering. Everybody has strengths and everybody has weaknesses. And that's okay, because we are working together on stuff.
Yes, we're all humans in connection with each other, living in the world.
Right. That's really the foundation of all of this, isn't it?
Yes. Okay. The show notes can be found at sagefamily.com/podcast60, where you can also subscribe and get future show notes sent right to your inbox. And for our deep dive, I am going to include links to all the things that we talked about in this episode and all of the good offerings from Sue and all of the places you can find her podcast, which for those of you who have expressed interest in me doing like a little short 5-minute podcast, since I want to talk to people for hours and hours, that's Sue's podcast.
That's right. That's right. Rachel handles the deep dives and I handle the, you can do it. Here's a couple things. All right, go.
That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. So you definitely want to check out her podcast and follow her on social media and all of that good stuff. Sue, thank you so much for coming back and joining me again.
I loved it. Anytime.